Hello everyone. So I'm also studying behavior like Steph LeBlanc. So my talk is called Nesting Behavior of Laying Hens Housed in Furnished Cages. So just a bit of background about nesting behavior. So it's a highly motivated behavior pattern. It's actually hormonally motivated. So hens are motivated before they lay an egg to actually go through a specific behavior pattern. It starts with the searching phase. So this is kind of self-explanatory in terms of a hen is searching to find a nesting location. And depending on the type of system, the time that it will take to search actually changes. In alternative systems, they'll actually search for longer, potentially, than other systems. But if they don't have a nesting site that is adequate, they may also search for a long time as well. Searching phase is followed by a sitting phase. And essentially, once a hen finds a nest that she's happy with, she will sit there until she lays her egg. And in kind of a normal nesting pattern, the sitting phase might take up to an hour. And of course, this is ended by oviposition. And so what do hens look for at a nest site? And a lot of these studies were conducted in pen systems with kind of ideal conditions, but hens look for two different things. They look for an enclosed space, so privacy, one could say, not necessarily darkness though, and that was actually done by research in the 60s. And then they also look for different substrates. In alternative systems, they of course prefer litter. This is followed by turf, and finally coated or bare wire is kind of the least preferred. But this is what you most often find in systems like furnished cages. But we don't know actually what nesting behavior looks like in furnished cage systems in terms of how hens spend their time before they actually lay their egg, which is where my research comes in. So the aims of my research project are to investigate, investigate the use of nests and nesting behavior in large furnished cages. The long-term objective of my study is to provide recommendations in order to improve these nest sites in furnished cages from the perspective of animal welfare. And so I'll go through two experiments that I've done so far, and then I'll talk about some future directions. So the first experiment was a couple of years ago now, and we looked at two different parameters. So we looked at cage size and space allowance. So we had two different cage sizes, large and small, which housed different numbers of birds, and I'll explain that in a second, and then two space allowances. And so this gave us four different treatments. We had group sizes of 28, 40, 55, and 80 birds. And for the measures, I looked at three different things. So I looked at where they laid their eggs, what time in the morning that egg laying occurred in terms of the curve of production, and then also behavior. So I looked at aggressive behavior and then sitting behavior as a proxy for nesting behavior. And then in the second experiment, I looked at the effect of, again, cage size. That's kind of one of our permanent treatments, and also rearing environment. So the treatments here, again, were large and small cages, and then two rearing environments. So looking at how nesting behavior is affected by where a hen is reared. So we had both standard rearing, so just kind of conventional cage rearing, and also aviary rearing in kind of a pullet portal system. And the measures were similar. So I looked at egg location, and I also looked at individual behavior. So this meant following one bird around from when the lights went on in the morning till when they laid their eggs. And that could be half an hour, or it could be 5 hours. So that was fun. And then in terms of results, I'll just go over a couple briefly. So in terms of the first experiment, we found that cage size actually affected egg location, but space allowance had no effect, which was the exact opposite of what we thought would happen. So this is just the percent of eggs laid in the nest. So there was a difference between large and small cages. So hens actually laid more eggs in the nest in small cages, 92% compared to large cages. But there was no difference whether they had low space allowance or high, which is unusual. We would have expected actually less hens to lay in the nest in the low space allowance treatment, but we didn't find that at all. And when looking at the behavior, we found that egg laying actually peaked at the same time as aggressive behavior, which potentially shows evidence for competition. And then we also found that rearing environment actually influences nesting behavior in terms of the perception of what a good nest is. So very similar in terms of cage size, the same results as the first experiment, but hens actually laid in the nest more if they were reared in a cage compared to an aviary. And potentially the aviary reared birds actually may adapt more quickly to an environment. We found an age effect as well. And so in terms of directions, what we're going to do with this research, we're hoping to do some preference tests to see what specifically hens actually look for in a nest site. We're also looking at using a different strain of birds to actually look at the egg product and see what the consequences are in terms of nest choice for egg quality. And that's the end of my talk.